The Nephites are back in their lands after all that conflict.
It's the 26th year.
Trying to rebuild.
Yeah, rebuilding everything.
And Scripture says they did return to their own lands and their possessions, both on the north and on the south, both on the east and on the west.
That's 3 Nephi chapter 6, verse 1.
Bringing everything they could.
Flocks and herds.
Gold and silver.
It really shows how resilient they were.
Imagine having to start your life over.
After so much was destroyed.
But they were ready to make their society thrive again.
Wasting no time.
And they did also build cities again, and villages. And they did multiply exceedingly.
Verse 2.
And for a while, it seemed like they figured out how to keep peace.
Yeah, they really did.
They were sharing resources equally.
Even with people who had been their enemies.
Can you imagine that?
It's amazing.
You can really feel the unity and forgiveness.
In verse 3.
And they did also establish peace in the land. And they did raise up unto themselves judges and teachers who should judge the people according to the laws of God.
Building their society on justice.
And righteousness.
Right.
And it came to pass that they did keep the law of Moses. Yea, they did observe to keep his statutes and his judgments and his commandments continually. And they did live after the manner of happiness.
Wow.
Verse 4.
What would be the most important things to you if you had to rebuild your life after something like that?
I think they really wanted to make a just and fair society.
It did a great job for a while.
But people are complicated.
Yeah.
Even when we try to do what's best.
It's true.
Things can still go wrong.
Let's skip ahead to the 29th year.
Oh.
We can see some problems starting.
And it came to pass, in the 29th year, there began to be some disputings among the people. And some were lifted up unto pride and boastings, because of their exceeding great riches, yea, even unto great persecutions.
Where's 10?
Pride, boastings, even persecutions.
What happened?
Well, when their society got more successful, some groups were tempted by all that wealth and power.
The next verse even lists merchants and officers.
People with influence and authority.
It's interesting.
Their jobs probably made them want more.
More wealth, more power.
It wasn't just individuals being prideful either.
This inequality was hurting everyone.
And it came to pass that they did not establish their laws and their governments according to the laws of God, and they did persecute those that did desire to keep the laws of God and observe his statutes and his judgments.
Verse 12.
It became like a class system.
More than just money.
Education too.
For they began to think to get gain and to get power and to get popularity and to get riches.
That same verse.
Does this happen every time a society is successful?
It makes you wonder.
All these divisions led to a really sad outcome.
And thus there became a great inequality in all the land, insomuch that by the 30th year the church was broken up.
That's verse 14.
A society built on faith and goodness broken apart by pride and inequality.
So sad.
But there's one exception.
What's that?
Except it were among the Lamanites, for they did continue in the faith and the doctrine of Christ.
Still verse 14.
Why were they different?
Maybe they learned how important unity and compassion are.
Because they had been treated badly themselves.
Makes you think.
It seems like everything they worked so hard to build was falling apart.
Peace, unity, a just society.
And it was happening from the inside.
Now we start to see something even darker happening.
Yeah.
And it came to pass that the people did reject the more part of the preachers because of their exceeding great riches and their pride and their vanity. And they did stumble and did fall into temptations and did yield unto the persuasions of Satan, which did come down and go forth among the people.
Verse 15.
Really scary.
And he did stir them up in pride against that which was good, and did pacify them which was evil, insomuch that he did blind their eyes, and did harden their hearts, that they did not believe in the words of the prophets, and were angry with them.
Still verse 15.
You can almost feel the darkness.
It's a good reminder that we need to be careful even when things are going well.
Yeah.
There are still temptations that can lead us away from what's good.
Satan is always looking for weaknesses.
It's sad that the Nephites knew what God wanted, but still made those bad choices.
Verse 16 says it all. And the 6 years had not passed away, since the more part of the people had turned from their righteousness, like the dog to his vomit, or like the sow to her wallowing in the mire.
They lost their peace so quickly.
It really is heartbreaking.
It shows that we always have to keep fighting for what's right.
Even if we've been faithful and obedient before,
you can still be tempted to sin.
Now some people started to see how bad things were getting.
They decided to speak out against it.
Remind everyone about God's commandments.
And what happens when we don't follow them?
Verse 20 says, And now it came to pass that there were many of the rising generation that could not understand the words of the king. being the language of Zarahemla. Nevertheless, they had been taught after the manner of the Jews, and they did believe the tradition of their fathers.
These people were like a little bit of hope.
In a society that seemed to be forgetting God,
They held on to what their ancestors taught them.
they knew God's law.
And they wanted to share it with everyone else.
But not everyone wanted to hear it.
And it came to pass that they did preach unto the people, insomuch that they did put it into their hearts to inquire of the Lord. And they did go forth unto the elders, and did inquire of them the meaning of the words which they had heard preached.
Verse 21.
They were making people think about their choices.
And the people in power didn't like that.
Especially the judges.
They were used to having wealth and authority.
And they didn't want to be questioned.
And it came to pass that the judges did expound unto them the words which they had heard, and did preach unto them the word of God.
The judges started getting really angry with these preachers.
It's like what happens when people try to change things.
The people in charge often try to stop them.
They see it as a threat.
They want to keep things the way they are.
This is where things get really bad.
The corruption is going to get even worse.
And it's going to cause major problems for their whole society.
We'll have to wait for the next part to see what happens.
This is getting intense.
It really is.
You won't want to miss what happens next.
Last time we were talking about those people speaking out.
Trying to remind everyone about God.
It's tough to stand up to the people in charge like that.
Especially when they want to stay in power.
It's like those judges didn't even listen.
They just kept doing more bad things.
Now, it came to pass that in the 36th year, the people were divided, and they had had many wars and contentions. And it came to pass also that the armies of the Lamanites came down out of the land of Nephi to battle against the people of the Nephites.
Verse 23.
They had problems on the inside.
And now the Lamanites are attacking again.
It's like all their problems were making them weak.
Yeah, like their enemies could see that they were divided.
And those corrupt judges
They were trying to take advantage of the situation.
to get even more power.
And it came to pass that they did cause that thing, that the people should assemble themselves together at the land of Moroni, which was on the border of the seashore.
Verse 24 of chapter 6.
And it came to pass that they did meet the Lamanites there, both with their armies. And it came to pass that the Nephites did beat the Lamanites and did slay many of them.
Verse 25.
They were using this war with the Lamanites
To make people scared.
to make it seem like they were the only ones who could keep everyone safe.
It's something that happens a lot.
Make people afraid of an enemy.
It doesn't even matter if the enemy is real or not.
And then you can do whatever you want.
It worked too.
And it came to pass that they did cause that the people should assemble themselves together at the land desolation to a city which was in the borders by the narrow pass which led into the land southward.
Verse 27.
They were moving people around,
Like they were playing some kind of game.
controlling everything.
It was all planned out.
And there they did appoint judges to judge those who should be judged according to the law. And they did cause that those who were condemned to death should be cast into the deep. And they did cast into the deep many of the prophets of God because of their iniquities and wickedness.
Verse 20.
They were killing people just for speaking out against them.
No trial. No, nothing.
That's awful.
They didn't care about justice anymore.
Just wanted to keep their power.
They were afraid of being found out.
But people had to know what was happening.
Someone must have tried to stop them.
And it came to pass that they did search out and kill all the prophets of God who prophesied of the destruction of Jerusalem and also of the coming of Jesus Christ. And they did kill many of the people who believed on their words and were converted unto the Lord.
The end of verse 28.
They weren't just killing the people who were speaking out.
They were killing anyone who believed them too.
They wanted to get rid of anyone who disagreed with them.
It was like a reign of terror.
But how did they get away with it?
They must have had help.
And it came to pass that Lyconius, the governor of the land, received an epistle from the judges, which informed him of the wickedness and abomination which was among the people. And it came to pass that it did cause great sorrow unto Lyconius, for he did believe the writing of the judges. For they did write unto him according to their manner of writing.
Verse 25 of chapter 7.
So the judges had people on their side,
People who are supposed to be good.
but they were helping to hide the bad things,
It's like a disease.
spreading through their whole society.
Even the parts that were supposed to be keeping things fair and honest.
Makes you think about what was going on with the regular people.
Yeah. Were they just letting this happen?
Were they too scared to say anything?
Or had the judges tricked them so well?
That they didn't even know the truth anymore?
This is a story that's happened over and over again.
What are people supposed to do when the people in charge are doing bad things?
It's a reminder that we always have to pay attention.
To what's happening around us.
And we have to be brave enough to speak up.
Even when it's dangerous.
Because if we don't,
Bad things can happen.
and we might even end up helping them without realizing it.
We'll have to wait for the next part to see how this all ends.
It's going to be interesting.
And see how the good guys fight back against all this evil. So those judges, they were really good at tricking people.
They even used religion to make people do what they wanted.
That's messed up.
And it came to pass that they did preach unto the people, and did teach them the scriptures, and they did preach many things which were true.
Verse 20 of chapter 7.
But then they would twist things.
To get what they wanted.
And they did exhort the people, saying, Behold, we are the priests of God. We have been chosen by him, and we are holy men. Therefore, we demand that you should believe us.
Verse 30.
They acted like they were the only ones who could speak for God.
To get people to obey them.
Yeah, and so no one would question them.
It's like they knew how much people wanted to feel safe.
Especially when everything else was going wrong.
And they took advantage of that.
They made themselves seem like the only ones who could save everyone.
But they weren't really trying to help anyone.
Just themselves.
And it came to pass that they did cause the home, that the people should support them with their substance, and they did build strong towers and fortifications out of the substance which they did take from the people.
Still verse 30.
They were getting rich by stealing from everyone.
Building their own fancy places while everyone else suffered.
And they wanted even more.
Verse 31 tells us what they were really after.
What's that?
And they did cause that the people should assemble themselves together at the land of Moroni by the seashore, and there they did enter into a covenant that they would maintain their right to the government and also their right to their substance and to their lands and to their wives and to their children and their right to the priesthood.
They wanted to be in charge of everything.
The economy, people's families, even their religion.
They're talking about rights.
But they just wanted power.
It's scary how easily they fooled everyone.
People thought they were being led by good men.
But they were being lied to and manipulated.
This story shows us that we always have to be careful.
To think for ourselves.
Not just believe everything we hear.
Especially from people in power.
We need to be brave enough to ask questions.
And to stand up for what's right.
Even when it's hard.
This has been a really powerful look at how societies can fall apart.
Even when they start out with good intentions.
Thanks for helping us understand all this.
You're welcome.
And to everyone listening.
Thanks for joining us.